The choosing of a child's name is one of the biggest decisions parents will make, one that our tradition teaches has an impact beyond how the world recognizes an individual, but also on who that child grows up to be, in that they will embody the qualities of their name. With this in mind, we named our son Gabriel, God is my strength, in honor of my grandmother Sarah, who had the strongest character and force of personality. She was a modern woman before her time, and boy, did that land with Gavi. In spades, our son is a force of nature. Biblical names are popular, but as the late Rabbi Harold Kushner once said, the Torah is filled with heroes we don't really want our kids to grow up to be like. And for me, in this week's Torah portion, Pinchas is one of them. I struggle every year with his story, and his name was nowhere near my lists for my children. But this week's Torah portion is named for Pinchas, and yet it also tells the story of Zelophehad's daughters, one of whom is called Noah, and that's the name we would have given to Gavi had he been a girl. Pinchas and Zelophehad's daughters, Machla, Noah, Hogla, Milcah, and Tirzah, offer us two contrasting models of leadership, where both receive affirmation from God for their actions. So, in the NC 17 conclusion to last week's Torah portion, the Israelite men were engaging in idolatrous sexual transgressions with foreign women, sins for which a plague was raging in punishment. Pinchas, the grandson of Aaron, the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, encountered an Israelite man and a Midianite woman engaging sexually with each other in the Mishkan, in God's dwelling place on earth, a place of absolute holiness, an act of idolatrous defilement and sacrilege. In Numbers 25, starting with verse 7, it says, when Pinchas saw this, he left the assembly, and taking a spear in his hand, he followed the Israelite man into the chamber and stabbed both of them, the Israelite man and the woman, through the belly, and then the plague against the Israelites was checked. Those who died of the plague numbered 24,000. God spoke to Moses, saying, Pinchas, son of Eleazar, son of Aaron the priest, has turned back my wrath from the Israelites by displaying among them his passion for me, so that I did not wipe out the Israelite people in my passion. Say, therefore, I grant him my pact of friendship. It shall be for him and his descendants after him a pact of priesthood for all time, because he took impassioned action for his God, thus making expiation for the Israelites. So before we unpack this very hard passage, let's fast forward a little to the case of Zelophehad, who had no sons as heirs, but had 5 daughters who, after his death, insisted that their father was a law-abiding, upstanding man whose legacy deserved to be preserved and that they ought to be the ones to do so. In a succinct, beautifully argued plea, they advocated for their rights and established those rights for themselves and for all future generations of Israelite women with God's ringing endorsement. The Torah recounts, the daughters of Zelophehad came forward. The names of the daughters were Machla, Noah, Hogla, Milcah, and Tirzah. They stood before Moses, Eleazar the priest, the chieftains, and the whole assembly at the entrance of the tent of meeting, and they said, our father died in the wilderness. He was not one of the faction, Korach's faction, which banded together against God, but died for his own sin, and he has left no sons. Let not our father's name be lost to his clan just because he had no son. Give us a holding among our father's kinsmen. Moses brought their case before God, and God said to Moses, the plea of Zelophehad's daughters is just. You should give them a hereditary holding amongst their father's kinsmen, transfer their father's share to them. Further, speak to the Israelite people as follows. If a householder dies without leaving a son, you shall transfer his property to his daughter. Pinchas, along with Machla, Noah, Hogla, Milcah, and Tirzah, embody what Musar calls zerizut, alacrity, urgency, a fire in the belly. Musar, our system of self-improvement for the purpose of bettering the world, is based on these soul traits, midot, like zerizut, kavod, respect, anava, humility, savlanut, patience, and so on. Our teacher, Nancy Weiss, also says that the midot dance with each other, that our primary emotional reactions are also tinged with other layered gut responses. In Pinchas, zerizut, alacrity, dances with ka'as, hard, hot anger. In Zelophehad's daughters, zerizut dances with menuchat hanefesh, equilibrium, certainty, equanimity. Both Pinchas and Zelophehad's daughters stood up for what they believed were right. Both of them had a legitimate case to make for kavod, for honor, and both were rewarded by God. God's bestowing of friendship on Pinchas troubles me. I'll admit it, and I'm not alone. The Hasidic masters also grappled with Pinchas's act of violence and made metaphor out of it so as to steer us away from emulating him in our own moments of rage. Commentators on these verses also point towards God's pact of friendship being centered on preventing the families of Pinchas's victims from taking revenge on him, stopping an upward cycle of anger and more violence. Machla, Noah, Hogla, Milcah, and Tirzah, however, did not act as individual vigilantes in pursuit of justice. They were a masterfully united front, and like my grandmother Sarah, from whom Gavi was named, they were modern women before their time. The 4 times their names are mentioned in the Torah, rare for women to begin with, present an unshakable unit of solidarity. I don't have a biological sister, but I do know many sisters, and I think it's fair to say that for 5 sisters to entirely agree, act in utter lockstep, and be able to show up unflappably together in the face of authority is pretty darn impressive. I can only imagine what went on behind the scenes. Which sister feared challenging authority? Which one insisted it was her turn to be the spokeswoman? Which sister shut that one down? What childhood patterns they had to work against to stand as one, to speak in one voice as women in front of Moses, God, and the entire community. But they did the work. They prepared and calmly rose together to the occasion, and they won their case before God. Pinchas, on the other hand, acted decisively in a searing flash of destruction. Our tradition does teach that there are some moments, some threats, that are so dire that only such dramatic and at times even violent action is justified in order to prevent catastrophic damage to the community as a whole. Indeed, Pinchas's act stopped the punishing plague that was consuming the Israelites. But in today's volatile world, where every moment feels fraught and combustible, where social media and the news cycle keeps us on the edge of perpetual panic responses, there's a grave danger in assuming every threat rises to that level. It's critical to cultivate discernment, to recognize the difference, to build alternative skills for responding effectively and appropriately to the challenges we face. Musar is a wonderful tool in our kit for helping us nurture bechira, the ability to take a beat, a breath, and mindfully choose our best responses. Machla, Noah, Hogla, Milcah, and Tirzah gift us a model for this kind of focused, intentional, deliberate, persuasive strength. I appreciate that while the Torah makes us confront the Pinchas in all of us, another story in this parsha named for him reminds us that there are always multiple paths to justice. Pinchas may remain a perpetual challenge for me, but because we Jews are meant to wrestle with Torah, I stay in the struggle with gratitude that the Torah in its wisdom paired Pinchas' story with the lessons also taught by Machla, Noah, Hogla, Milcah, and Tirzah. Shabbat Shalom.